Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective. On today's episode, we have Angie Brambley-Moyer, head performance coach at Princeton University, where she's been for 21 years. Obviously, that's a very rare and unique situation within strength and conditioning. She speaks about why she loves Princeton, which is very exciting to hear. But I told her after the show, this is one of my favorite ones that I've done, and that's 100% genuine. And I love that she asked me why, because there has to be a reason with me saying things like that. And I told her, selfishly, it was something that I felt really benefited me, hearing her answers and understanding exactly how she goes about her process with her staff, with interviewing new staff members. Essentially all these things that are really, really valuable tools for people who are looking to become a director or just people who hire in general. I think it was really interesting to hear her hiring process, how she approaches it, how she handles conversations with her staff. And obviously she has a very, very true, genuine love for the profession, which is why she's been successful and why she's been able to stay at Princeton and become the head performance coach. So I thought it was very valuable for me. I hope you as a listener find it valuable as well. I actually know you will. And as always, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have a repeat guest, one of the original guests on the show prior to my hosting, Angie Brambley-Moyer. She's the head performance coach for Princeton University. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very, very excited. Like we talked about pre-show, both Temple graduates. I'm sure the school was a little bit different when you were there versus I was there. But it's always very fun for me to speak with somebody who graduated from the same school.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely different. I'm a little older than you, but hey, it's still Temple. It's still Temple.
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly got a spirit to it. And everybody down in North Carolina, it cracks me up. They'll always be like, "Oh my God, you went to Temple? Like, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it was a great time. Nothing bad happened."
You learn the street smarts there.
Oh, exactly. And it's funny. My fiance grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and so whenever we go to big cities, we have a very different outlook on how to operate. And so I've had to teach her just a little bit too, just to make sure we make it out fine.
That's a good balance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get right into it. Like you said, we've been trying to get this done for a little bit, so I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited to get going. Can you just break down your career and then what's brought you to Princeton?
Yeah. I was an undergrad at the University of Pittsburgh. I was always an athlete, a four-sport athlete in high school. And I was like an average, I worked hard. That's what got me to where I was. I had some athletic ability, but my dad was a coach and a lifelong coach and teacher. And I just loved athletics and everything that it would do for me. So I decided to go to the University of Pittsburgh for a degree in exercise science, interned a little bit there. And actually under Buddy Morris was the strength and conditioning coach there for football that was looking for interns, and our department head came in and said, I didn't know who Buddy Morris was or anything really about it. I was just like, I want to work with athletes. And, I started working with him, and then I started working with Kim King, first female strength and conditioning coach that I'd ever worked with there, and Tim Belts, who was there at the time. So I had a good group of mentors that helped me through the process. And when I was graduating, it was Tim Belts who was the one that said, hey, you could stay here, but I really encourage you to go someplace else. And, because you've already seen what we do here. So go learn someplace else. And I probably put out 30 resumes. But back in my day, when we actually had to do it by paper and print it out and put it in a manila envelope so they didn't have to fold it, right? Type in every head strength coach's name. Search on the internet when the internet wasn't what it was now. And Temple was the first place that got back to me. And it just so happened both my parents went to Temple. So they were familiar with the area. They were both from Eastern PA before they brought me to Western PA. And so, they were the first people. I was like, yes, I'll take it. So that was what brought me to Temple University. After I graduated from there, there was a gap year between my time. I worked in a private training facility after Temple, and then Princeton was hiring, and I applied and was, offered the role, and here I am, 21 years later, never left, which I know that is really unusual. But if we get into talking about Princeton, there's a lot of explanation as to like how special the place actually is. So here I am.
Yeah, I'd love to dive right into that because I think it is a little bit of a rarity in the field. What has kept you at Princeton for 21 years?
Um, Working with going from the Temple athlete to Princeton athlete is much different. You know, they obviously all athletes like want to win. Just the mentality of the athlete. It was much different at Princeton. I would say that like when I first got there, I was just surprised when every time an athlete's got done a training session, they'd thank me. That was new, you know. It was just a different atmosphere, I guess I would say. And like the place grows on you. When I was a young strength conditioning coach, like I always wanted to go south. Actually, I was just kind of like I want to be in the south. I don't know if it was just the attractiveness of like Southern hospitality, or what, but it was just something I always wanted to do, and I've never really got the opportunity until later in my career. I was a bit more established at Princeton, and I saw the place grow. So it was just me and our head strength and conditioning coach for 4.5 years. And we trained 12 of the 38 sports that they had there. We worked out of one weight room. And as the years went by, we started hiring more staff and taking on more teams. And like I helped build that staff. So Jason Galucci, who is still at Princeton, he's our director of performance now, has been my mentor for 21 years. And we built that place together. And when you kind of build something, it's hard to leave. And once I became established as a strength and conditioning coach and my name got out there, and, I've coached a lot of teams because at Princeton, you don't just have one team. I should say in the Ivy League, I can speak for the Ivy League in this. Like we usually have, I've had 6 teams up until probably 3.5 years ago where I had 5. And then this is my first year of only having 4 teams. So you have multiple teams. So you kind of build your brand on working with a lot of teams, not working with one. So coaches would say that, like, I'm a generalist. I think that generalists are needed in the field. I think specialists are needed in the field as well, but I can hire specialists. If I'm a generalist, then I'll hire a specialist. And I've grown to be a specialist. So when I got some offers, as I was saying, I have had some offers to, leave the university. I was at that point, it was an offer. I had to take an offer that I couldn't refuse. That's kind of where I was at with it. My husband's from the area that we live in, and the area just grew on me. And I was like, if I'm going to leave here, it's just got to be an offer I can't refuse. And through that process, like my title change, I got a title change. I've taken on more responsibility. I've built our staff at Princeton, our current staff. I've built the last 5 years. So there's something to be said for that. And when I've gotten some offers, they were one sport only offers. And I'm not used to that. I'm not used to just being with one team. And 4 teams is still a lot, by the way. 6 teams is too much, but 4 teams is a lot. But I like that. I like having a team every season. I like having an in-season team every season, and I love the leadership role. It was a hard transition to make because I made it. I was leading my peers. These were my colleagues, were people that I was, the same position title as they were. And then all of a sudden I got an associate head title and I started becoming a leader with them. And that was a tough transition. But once I got used to the position, and just kind of the role of what being a leader really is, I really embraced it. I loved it. I really dove into it. I couldn't stop reading things about leadership, and I just really like the leadership role. And I'm always going to be a leader. If I'm a coach, I'm a leader. I get that. So if I'm a coach of one team or if I'm a coach of 4, I'm still leading that team. But I really enjoy leading a staff. I look at them as my peers. I'm like, never call me your boss. I don't like that. Technically I'm your supervisor. We sit down and we do, our annual reviews together, whatever review we have to do. But I'm one of them and I love being one of them. But obviously there's some other things I have to do. And I like being involved in the administrative aspect of things and just helping the place grow more. And obviously the university trusted me to do that. And here I am.
You bring up something really interesting that was honestly one of the first things I thought about when you said you've been at Princeton for 21 years, which is transitioning into the leadership role. What were the challenges that you faced? Because I'm sure there was a little bit of uncomfortability to start.
100%. Well, first, I mean, when the first day you make that transition and you've been working with people that have been basically your your position title equals, I mean, there's awkwardness there, but you just have to kind of lean into it. I mean, it is what it is. If I knew what I was going into, but didn't know how hard it was going to be in that role and making that kind of transition until I was there. So day one, day 90, it wasn't an easy thing to do. But then we had some people come and go. And then when I'm hiring new people in, then they become the people that I hired. Also, it took coaches some time because they were also always used to going to my supervisor about things. And there were things that they needed to come to me about, but they were never used to coming to me about it. So it took some time for coaches to realize via encouragement, via the administration or my supervisor saying, hey, have you talked to Angie first? This is something you need to go to her about. And I mean, it's taken some time, but we've gotten there. Those are the two biggest, would say, hurdles that I had to, earning the trust of the staff that I could, lead in that role. So I like to say earn it. I mean, yeah, a position title might say, hey, I'm your supervisor, but I really do, just like earning the trust of our athletes, I think it's important to earn the trust of your staff. And then earning the trust of the coaches was another one. The third hurdle would have been asking the right questions when you're hiring people. The questions that I asked day one of my very first hire are not the questions that I ask now. I just dig into things a lot differently now than I did when I first started hiring. You just learn what to ask and what's important to ask to get as much as you can get out of a candidate as possible.
I don't mean to, try to have you reveal your secrets, but what questions do you ask?
I ask them questions. So there's a book called The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. He has a lot of books, but that's the one that I really leaned into. And he had some questions. His whole thing was being humble, hungry, and smart. And, smart as in smart with people, not intelligent smart. And some of his questions, so he had just a list of questions that he has on his website that I was looking into. So there's questions like, when you can ask, what is something that your friends or family would say that that you annoy them? What's annoying to them about you? And to have to answer that question is humility, and they're not questions really related to strength and conditioning per se, because I let my staff do that. I let them dig into, do you know the tricks of the trade? But when it comes to who's going to be on your staff, it's really, really important. So there's just a couple questions like that are difficult to answer. What annoys you most about people? And then is another question that I ask, and how do you handle those people? Questions like that. I mean, a lot of the questions kind of bleed into the questions that we would ask a candidate in general, like what kind of hours are you used to working? Because that demonstrates how hungry you are. What's the hardest thing you ever done in your life? What's the hardest thing you ever worked on in your life? Things like that. What was your work ethic as a teenager is a question. And people have to reflect, and I want to see them face to face. I mean, the Zoom thing, I guess, is one of the most beautiful things that could have happened with the interview process, because it used to be a phone call when you did a phone interview, and now our phone call interview is a Zoom interview. So right off the bat, when we're doing that interview, we do Zooms, because I like to look into people's eyes. I like to know what they look like when they're uncomfortable and they're answering a question that they have to think about. I don't know. I want to look into people's eyes when they answer questions. And then obviously we do an on-campus interview. Through COVID, we had to do the whole process online, but now we're back to on-campus interviews. So then when they're on their on-campus interview, it's the second time that I've seen them, and I think that's important. I think people's mannerisms are important. And so that's where I'm at.
No, I love it. And I think on a microscopic level, I can relate with hiring interns. I've figured out quickly that there's a lot of different questions I need to ask. And I've had I think the beautiful part with interns is after 6 months, usually their time is up and I'll either ask them back or not for the next semester. I think hiring a staff is a little bit different, right? Because you have to learn how to work with that person. In the past, when you haven't been asking these questions and you've had to kind of work with a new staff member who you have to navigate and understand how to work with them, how have you approached those situations?
You mean like a difficult staff member?
I would say difficult, yeah.
Well, the university actually implemented some things, but I implemented some things before they did some mandatory things. But I started implementing, like, instead of doing an annual review, we did like a 6-month review because our staff is spread out, and that's another thing. I know I'm jumping around here, so bring me back because I can go off on tangents. But in my
Oh, good.
situation, what made me do this was because our staff is spread out, and it wasn't like it was me and Jason Glucci sitting in an office, you know, 5 feet away every single day. When I was growing up through the field, that's how it was with him and I. But then there's staff that are in different buildings. So it becomes even more important then. So if I'm like, it was more meeting more often, I guess I'd say. I implemented a midterm review. So when we got to the annual review, it was like, hey, we talked about these things. Um, you know, like where do you think we are with the things that we've talked about, as to where we actually are. Also, the more, I would say, the more conversations you have with people, that you feel that are difficult, the better. The problem is them feeling like they're being micromanaged. So when I bring in a new staff member, I'm like, hey, at the first you're going to feel like you're micromanaged. Like, don't take it personal, like right off the bat, because I don't know you and you don't know me, and we want to help you along the way. So there's going to be a lot of check-ins, and don't take it as micromanagement. And I need you to follow back up with me too. I don't want it to always me being the one asking the questions. I need you to bring things to me as well, because I've had staff members that are in the past, like, I learned that they wanted to be like, I can do it myself. Like, there's value in someone saying, I want to figure it out on my own, because I wasn't like that. I'm like, give me all the information. How do I do this? How do I do that? I like staff members that want to figure out things on their own. But when I don't hear anything in return, I get worried with that as well. Especially if they're in a different facility. So it's important to have check-ins. I implemented that, half-year review was like one of the first things that I did. You're still going to have things that are difficult. So they didn't solve all the problems, but the more check-ins that you can have with somebody, the better. Starting with questions rather than I would do it this way. And allowing staff to handle things their own, because I am a fixer. Like, I want to fix it. I'm like, this is how I do it. But I want to create a space where my staff can come to me and say, hey, I'm having this difficulty with a coach, or it's about scheduling. Scheduling is very hard for us. We have a lot of teams, a lot of athletes, scheduling stuff. And like, what do you think I should do? And I give them my advice. And I'm like, I'm happy to sit in on the conversation if you want me to. I'm happy to have the conversation with you. How do you want me to handle this? That's what I give them, the opportunity to say, how do you want me to handle this? Most of the time these days, they're like, I want to do it on my own, but I just want to let you know, and I appreciate you being in my corner. So it's just having those conversations. So I have to step back as Angie the fixer and say, I'll help you. If you want me to help you in like a lot or a little, I'm here for you. Let me know how it goes. And that kind of gives a lot of them autonomy. The best way to, I feel like, lead my staff is autonomy. Obviously, in the beginning of the year, we're like, this is how Princeton Tiger Performance operates. This is what we do. Communication, number one. We have 5 facilities, like satellite, like we have 5 satellite facilities, and we have 8 strength and conditioning coaches. I still have my 14, so I'm doing the same day to day as you guys. We have to communicate. So that's kind of been the hammering things home. And then obviously the other logistical things that, are obvious things, like, no cursing on the music, can't have the music too loud, that kind of thing. You are an ambassador of the university. So know that every time you step off this campus and you have like a Princeton University athletics or a team shirt attire on, you are still an ambassador. So be careful, those kind of things. But autonomy is where I want to go with it. I really like expect and communication, because I know we're busy, and I'm not like, I don't want my staff to say, oh, we're a 7 a.m., 7 p.m., no matter how many teams you have and what your training sessions were. Like, that's I went through that. Like, I've been there, and that's not how I want to do things. This is not what I want for them. But they need to be there to, if they don't have something going on that day, like it's where can I help you first? Like, that's the question you're asking your fellow staff members. Where can I help you? Do you need any help? And then, okay, Angie, hey, like, I don't have any teams today. I'll be here on Saturday and Sunday. Like, I'm going to take off. No problem. There's never a time that I'm never going to say, no problem. Just let me know where you are. So, and that just goes back to communication. It sounds simple, but everybody's level of communication is different. So until they just kind of learn the level of communication that I want, we have hurdles, but like, it usually gets figured out.
How have you grown the skill of stepping back from being Angie the fixer? Because I'm asking on a personal level, right? Because I like to do
Yeah.
that. I've learned it from my fiance that it's not always the best way to approach things, right? But how have you grown
Mm.
that skill yourself?
Well, Connor, they say like the first step is acknowledgement. You have to acknowledge that you have a problem. And then you have to take steps to, like, it's taking a pause, really. It's just taking a pause. I think I've been in situations enough where um, I've butted some heads with like my staff about things like that, I guess. And me wanting to have my hand in everything, then I'm like, this doesn't work. It doesn't work. And people don't grow that way, by the way. If you want somebody to grow, they're going to have to make mistakes on their own, and they're going to have to figure out, like they said, they wanted to have this conversation, have the conversation, but let me know how it goes. So that's where the communication piece comes in. Um, but as more often than not, I've had more issues with trying to do it all than just me taking a step back and letting them grow. Because, I've been in situations where somebody has fixed for me, and then I never learned how to do that on my own. I always relied on somebody else to do it for me. And then when you're in position, like, you're the new assistant director of strength conditioning at Appalachian State, how do you learn how to have these conversations with administration if if somebody didn't allow you to lean into like a difficult conversation? Like, we're always telling our athletes, learn to have a hard conversation. Do I have athletes that are afraid to come up and be like, Angie? Yeah, they do. But like, if I'm the hardest conversation that they have, then you're doing okay. So learn how to have hard conversations.
No, that makes complete sense. Do you try to set your staff members up with those opportunities?
100%.
Yeah.
I'm just like, if you so back to like when you're onboarding somebody, and I don't have a sheet like where this is our onboarding process. I just kind of go through let's give them all the information and if you need me, let me know. Happy to help you in any way. Scheduling is always our biggest hurdle. So that's probably where I'm helping the most. And they're like, what would you do? What would you do? I'm like, well, what do you want to do? I actually just said that to a staff member today. Like, how do you want to handle it? What are you thinking? You know, I let them, they don't know what they're thinking. I asked my staff member this, and I'm like, well, what do you want? What are you thinking? And I'm like, all right, hello. And they're like, oh, well, what you said. And I'm like, well, what did I say? Like, they don't even know what they're thinking. They don't even know what they want. So like, what do you want? And then, okay, if that's what you want, why do you want it? Like, talk them through the situation. Like, I can tell you what I would do, but I'm not one having that conversation with that coach. You are. I'm happy to have that conversation with that coach, but that's too easy. And usually, like, they learn to, like, if it goes horribly, like, and when I say horribly, if that means that they're here till 8 p.m. because they decided not to have the hard conversation and lean in to that challenge with the coach, then they made that decision. I didn't make that decision for you. Do I want you to be here till 8 p.m.? No, I don't. But I gave you the opportunity to have that conversation. You decided this. You didn't go in the meeting knowing exactly, like, lay it out there for them and make a decision, be like, this is how it's got to go, coach. And, they, then you have to kind of face the consequences. I mean, and again, I'm always there to help. Like, listen, the good thing about Princeton University, this is the third AD that I've had since I've been here, and they've all been great, by the way. I mean, from our first AD to the person like that was in the middle until the one we have now. I mean, the quality, their respect of quality of life is every year, every new AD just grows and grows and grows. Our current AD says it all the time. When you can take breaks, take breaks. Quality of life. So if he's preaching that to our whole athletic staff and our athletic staff meetings, every coach hears it. Every head coach, every assistant coach, they hear it. So if I was to go to a coach and say, "Hey, coach, John Mack said that this is the absolute only time we can go, fine, but like he does speak about quality of life, and you're going home to your kids, and I'm still having to be here and lift, and I have an hour drive home. So where can we meet in the middle?" It's being able to have that transparency, because I know that it's a badge of honor for a lot of strength and conditioning coaches just to grind and to drink coffee at 5 p.m. Like, I'm not doing that anymore, and I don't want that for them either. So I yes, there are going to be times when we grind. Yes, when there's going to be schedules that change. Like, yes, am I going to be here till? Am I not going to get home till 8 p.m. tonight? That's happening to me tonight, right? But you learn how to balance those situations. But I do think it's important for the longevity of the field to have some flexibility. And I'm only speaking for our AD. I'm not speaking for every AD in Ivy League. I'm not speaking for obviously Power Four, like any other conference, mid majors, whatever. But there's value in that. And a lot of I had a strength coach call me on Friday, and he had trouble with scheduling a team, and I said, "Hey, listen, it's okay to kind of present as vulnerable. Like, hey, coach, I need this because I need this, because vulnerability is power. You don't have to look as vulnerable as a weakness." And I know that's very, very hard to do, especially it is for a male strength and conditioning coaches. They'll just be like, "Fine, I'll do it." I'm like, "What do you mean, fine, you'll do it?" I'm not telling, as your supervisor, I'm not telling you, "Fine, or do it." Do you want me to have that conversation with the coach? I'm happy to do it. And they're like, "No, whatever." I'm like, "All right, well then you suffer the consequences if you don't stand up for yourself." So it's taken a while to get to this point. But our coaches are reasonable too. We don't, it's just, I mean, the Ivy League is a different place, right? And I can really only speak about Princeton when it comes to what I've seen here. But we win, we're relevant nationally, we're relevant internationally, as a matter of fact. But it's not win at all cost here, you know. So I mean, we do things the right way, and whatever that means to you. People are like, "Well, what's the right way?" Well, we not only do we have NCAA rules, we have Ivy League rules, and on top of the NCAA rules. So and there is really they push the student first before the athlete. So as coaches, we're that's forced into us, where you really have to figure out a way, the art of coaching, if you will, whether it be a sport or strength and conditioning, as to how to get the most out of your athletes when you don't have all the time like all those other coaches have. So I mean, our coaches are reasonable. I mean, we have those situations where it's really about educating the sport coach. It's not they just don't have an understanding. But if we don't present with an understanding of where we stand, if you want to go home to your fiance and your dogs, you know, you have a life too, and that's important. And just as it's important for them. So it's just about being okay saying it. And it's about teaching somebody how to say it and when to say it.
That's one of the things I really appreciate about my director here of the Olympic sports. He, essentially over the summer was like, "Hey man, you can say no. You have the ability to say no." And he said, "I actually want you to say no more." And it happened just a couple weeks ago. I train women's golf as well. We train 3 days per week. And unfortunately, because of the timing, it has to be at 6 a.m. And so he reached out and said, "Can we go 4 days per week in this off season?" And I said, "You know what? I really, unfortunately, don't think I can do that, because at the end of the day, we're going to start playing basketball games. I'll be here till about 9:30, 9:45. I'm going to have to come up and go at 6 a.m. And I was like, that those 2 days per week that I can actually sleep in, I'm going to be a better coach for it. And I really think we can get everything done within those 3 days. And obviously I'm nervous to have this conversation, but then our coach was like, "Okay, great." It had zero qualms about it whatsoever. Yeah.
Yeah, you just had to educate them on it.
Yeah, 100%. And exactly like you said, I just explained to him. I was just straight up with him. I just said, I think I'll be a better coach for 3 days than 4 days if we go through that process. So it certainly made a difference for me. For you, going through 21 years at Princeton, like how have you grown from exactly like you mentioned with the old strength coach mentality of just chugging coffee all the time and doing everything possible and wearing yourself out to where you are now? Because 21 years, you certainly have to learn how to have a balance.
I definitely had to learn how to have the balance. Well, as a strength coach, I had to grow as I had to mature as a person, as a strength coach. Obviously, I've matured. Like I grew up here, my professional career. I grew up here, and I mean, on the coaching side of things, I just had to learn how to communicate better and communicate with my like when I'm talking about being a coach, I had to learn how to communicate with my athletes better. Like I had to learn that me saying, do this because it'll help you does not work. I like there you have to I mean, it depends where you are. I mean, Princeton, like they're very cerebral, athletes, and a lot of them want to know the why. I tell them the why before they even ask. Now,
Yeah.
it's not just do. It's telling them the why and how, and also connecting it to the actual sport. And, like we're doing this, and here's the reason why, but also this is how it connects to your sport. It's not just weight room or lacrosse. It's or soccer. It's this is how this transitions into the soccer, right? Um, and learning how to articulate that over the years is what's helped me, and learning to just really love the psychology of coaching. And this is like informal psychology. I didn't go and get a degree for it, but like it's just reading and learning and following things on in like social media, and just learning from other people that like there's like you have two kinds of coaches. You're either like I love the X's and O's, and that's the thing that's going to get us to win. Or I love the psychology, or you have both, right? It's the coach that really embraces both is the one that really wins, because the X's and O's are great, but if you can't get buy-in, that's not going to help you. If you only like the psychology, but you don't know the X's and O's, that's a giant problem. You have to have both. And yes, there's going to be times when it's like more psychology over coaching and more coaching over psychology. But if you don't really embrace both, it'll wear a coach down like that, like wear a coach down. And I've seen it happen to a lot of coaches, like they burn out very quickly. And I've just kind of learned to be like look into a kid's eyes and try to find the thing that drives them. I guess I'm trying to find their drive, and I love that. And if you don't love that, you're going to get burned out. It's not just about the weight room, or whatever, the sport coaching. On just the balance, so that's my coaching. That's what I would say when it comes to like how I grew as a coach. As as a professional and as an administrator, again, I mean, like the place has evolved too. Like Princeton has evolved. Like we hired more strength and conditioning coaches. Well, that just gave us the ability to have more balance. Like that's a logistical thing that has happened, and us really communicating with our administration. Like we need this, and here's why. You know, and hiring more strength and conditioning coaches has been a godsend. I mean, we just opened a new facility, and I'm actually sitting in the office of it right now. That's why there's nothing on the walls, but we added a new strength and conditioning coach to be the person over here for this facility, because we added a new facility. But I would take more people over more facilities any day, because the people like really help the quality of life for our strength and conditioning coach. It's hard to have to find a balance if you're like one strength coach with a GA and you have 18 teams. Like balance is going to be hard. Like I don't know how to, unless I was in that situation, I couldn't speak on how to create balance there. But to your point and to what your supervisor has said, you just sometimes have to learn to say no. If you just want to be like, it's a badge of honor for you to always be yes, somebody's going to walk all over you. If you don't create boundaries early, then they're going to always expect it. So this is what I told one of my strength coaches last week. I'm like, it's a new coach, it's a new head coach, create the boundaries early. If you don't create the boundaries early, it's going to be really hard to go back the other way. So learning how to create boundaries with whoever, whether it be coaches, administrators, communication. It just really comes down to communication. And like, yeah, do we get angry sometimes? Like, do we not get what we want? A lot of times, but I will say, along with like our, athletic director, really preaching quality of life. He also gives us a seat at the table. In fact, like our staff was in our weight room, one of our weight rooms lifting yesterday, and he just walked through. He's like, I'm not here to work out. I'm just here to say hey, which is awesome. We just, sat there and just chatted with him for a bit, and he just moved on through. But he gives us a seat at the table. Like, he wants to hear from us. That not all places are like that. So it's really hard to leave, going back to that earlier question you asked me, when it's hard to leave a place like that. It's hard to leave. For me, I mean, Princeton is relevant nationally and internationally. So do I need to be in a power four school for all the reasons people go to power four schools? No. Like, I'm proud of Princeton University. I'm proud of the tigers across my chest. It doesn't have to be a power four school to be relevant. It really doesn't. And I think we're the kind of an underdog because of how little we get when we have no scholarships. Our NIL deals are minimal. There's no pay to play in the Ivy League. Like, from the president's level, like, not even just athletic directors, the presidents, no pay to play in the Ivy League. And like, we have Ivy League athletes that can go and leave Princeton and get paid to play at other places, but they stay. I mean, yeah, we're going to have some kids that transfer. Yeah, we're going to, but the kids that choose to come here, like, know where we stand when they choose to come here, and it's understanding like why you decided to come here. I mean, I'm not part of recruiting a whole lot, and these aren't the conversations I'm having with recruits, but like, when I talk to our coaches and how they're selling the university, I mean, Princeton University isn't like a hard place to sell, and you just have to sell them the why, and the why your team, and like, in addition to the degree, obviously, but it's a special place. But as a staff member in our athletic department, like, our AD hears us, and that's important. That's important.
Well, you brought up one really interesting point when you were speaking about Pitt, how one of your mentors recommended going somewhere else, right, to continue to grow. And obviously, you can continue to grow in a place when you're in the same spot for 21 years. But what does that process look like for you? How do you make sure that you continue to get better as a coach?
I mean, I do obviously all the things that everybody else does when it comes to continuing education. But also, I hire people that don't know things that I know.
Mm.
I hire people that are different from me. I like to hire people that just come in with a different kind of skill set than I have. I don't want to hire people that are just like me and know what I know. I mean, we all know what each other knows from a basic level, but if they have like a special skill set, they really want to dive into something new. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone that can really bring something to the table. I mean, I was very, very slow to start any sort of technology, and now I'm running 3 catapult computers. Like, we don't have a sports scientist in Princeton, and I'm doing it for 3 teams. In fact, I have one sitting to my left right now. And I wouldn't say I was resistant on sports science. I was just slow to implement it. I was even slow to implement like Team Builder, or Bridge, or like, we have Team Builder at Princeton, and I started implementing it right before the pandemic. Thank goodness. That was a lifesaver. And yeah, it was a great time. And then, I don't know, I just slowly like watched my staff get into it, and like, the younger staff, like a lot of staff got in. I mean, not a lot of them. Some of them were really into the sports science, and some of them started getting into velocity-based training, and some of them started getting into this. And I'm like, all right, what are you guys doing? So I learned from them. I mean, I'm going to the conferences every year and taking certifications and doing all those things, not because I have to, because I want to. I still want to learn. But like, I don't have to just learn from going to like another university either. I can learn like just, like everybody else. So, yeah, I think it's important. Like, I definitely think that, maintaining certifications is important for that reason too, because you're forced to do it. And there's a lot of stuff out there, but our younger staff, like half our staff's under 30, which I don't even, does that matter? No, it really doesn't. But I like it because it just brings like some fresh ideas to the group. And like, I like to see what drives them, and it balances us out.
It's funny. It's the second time I've heard that of hiring people who know things different from you, right? The first time was a little bit of a heartbreak for me because it was a coach I loved and we got along super well. And he was an older coach, and obviously as a younger coach, he had a position open up, and it technically would have been me moving to a lower position or whatever, right? But it was somebody who I really wanted to work with, and I was like, well, I kind of was like, well, I might be interested in this. He's like, Connor, I'd never hire you, and I was like, why? He's like, we're the exact same person. We you wouldn't help me grow. I wouldn't really help you grow. I have to hire somebody who's good at other things. Now, obviously, I took that a little personally, right? And then it took me a little bit to get over it and
Yeah.
figure out that he was right, and it would have been a great growth opportunity for me besides just hanging out with somebody I like every day. But it's funny that you mentioned that as well too, because I think that's some really solid advice.
It's I live by it. I have to. Um, but because I don't really plan on going anywhere. And I'm not getting any younger, like I have to evolve with the field. Like you have to evolve. If I don't evolve, then it's like, then I'm done. Like if I don't feel even the drive to want to evolve, then why am I doing this? Because the field itself is evolving.
So it seems like you have a very strong love for your profession. I can tell this, and you exude and you speak about it many times about how you have to truly love the profession and continue doing it. We were studying as a team, championship teams, and one of the biggest themes I noticed that everybody who was successful truly loves what they do. How do you approach conversations with coaches who are kind of questioning it a little bit, or you see that they may not be fostering that love for the profession?
With young coaches, for instance, interns, we talk about the grind a lot, and I mean, there's a certain level of embracing that has to happen when you give like a young strength conditioning coach a lot of work to do just to see how they handle it. There's no checklist, for instance, but obviously a lot of observation goes on, in this field. We're coaches, we use our coach's eye, we do that for people too, and there's an energy that's around them. I think the love for being in the weight room is part of it. Like a lot of people say they want to be around athletes or they love sports, but it's like, do you actually want to be in the weight room? I don't think anybody's really going to honestly answer that question whether it be a staff member or an intern, if you ask them straight up. But I think that talk is cheap, and actions speak a lot louder than words. So you just have to observe and challenge them. And with one of our young strength and conditioning coaches, I just said to them last week, I want you to get a specific certification, just because next level lifting experience, I guess, is what it is. It's not about the letters behind your name, but the certification when it comes to having another extra level of experience when it comes to lifting technique is an important one to have. And I come from an Olympic weightlifting background, so I love that certification. And I told them specifically, I was like, you not the online certification, you need to go and do it in person, because I know that it's a 2-day certification and I know what it takes to do it. So it really, for that person, it's not about even like their passion, because we hired this person, they were a casual hourly for us, and then they became a full-time hire, and we still made them go through the rigors of a full interview process, because we wanted them. First of all, an interview process is a really important thing to go through, even as a young strength and conditioning coach. Young person in general, go through an interview process. If it's not your dream job, so what? Like, go through the interview process, because it's definitely a learning experience, and there's a poise that you learn when you've answered difficult questions or questions on the spot. So we hired the strength and conditioning coach, and we knew that she had like a passion for the field, but I also want to challenge her a little bit and just say, hey, like I would like to love you see get this certification, because she doesn't come from a lifting background. She comes from a soccer background. And she was all for it. I mean, right away, that tells you right there, like her reaction on the spot, she's like, okay, yeah, I agree. That was her. I was like, great. So if there's hesitation there, then I'm like, oh boy, so how this is going to be a workaround, and it's not even about the certification. It was about the enthusiasm with the suggestion. And That's just one little example, though. It depends on the person. Like, there is no checklist on how to do this. I know I talked to you about, these questions that I was asking in the interview process earlier. You can use a checklist, but there's just so much gray area when it comes to personalities. And this is an area of improvement. So, as your supervisor, I'm making a suggestion and accepted the suggestion. So, um, like, it's a hard question to answer when it comes to having the passion. I don't think we'll ever really know because there's a lot of great strength and conditioning coaches that got out of the field. So I wouldn't say that it's because there was a lack of passion for the field, you know. But as a young coach, there is a bit of grind and a bit of grit that you have in this field. And if you don't have it, you'll burn out very, very quickly. And for somebody that hires somebody, I don't want that because I don't like the hiring process. I want somebody that wants to stick around. I think the 5-year question is hard to ask somebody because I don't know what I'm doing in 5 years. So I'm like, what do you think you want to do in 5 years? And you're like, oh, you get all the same old answers. I think creativity with that answer is a good thing, but I don't think anybody really knows. So I think that constant questions, I know I said this before, but just constant questions like throughout the process and evaluating off the books, their level of feedback is also important. So if you have somebody that's just kind of marching the beat of their own drum, I mean, it might be the place, like it could be this place and they just need to be at a different place, or it could be the field. So it's hard to say, but this is kind of one of the questions I dig into when I interview people. I say that like we want somebody to stick around, and we're looking for someone who wants to stick around. So if you're looking at this, we don't have any entry level jobs here. We don't have GAs here. I mean, we have unpaid internships, but when it comes to a hire, I'm making a hire, like a full benefited hire. And we used to have a casual hourly position, and now that we don't have that anymore. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. And I want everyone that comes into this place, thinking that they're going to be here for just a bit, and I mean, I have different ways of how I kind of navigate those questions when we're in the interview process. And obviously someone could completely not tell me the truth, but I have all my notes and I'm like, you did say this, I know jobs will come and go, but like loyalty and sticking to your word means a lot. So if you think that in 2 years you want to go, then this probably isn't the job for you. And I'm happy telling a top candidate that because I do want people to stick around. I think it's hard. I mean, 1 year like in a place is nothing. You don't really get a feel for what it is. Like you could have championships, you might not have championships, but I think if you really want to stick around a place, now I can't speak for other places that are having transfers in and out, but this is a place where you will see a kid from freshman year to senior year. So, I mean, I think a 4-year cycle is a solid cycle to be in to say, hey, okay, I think I'm like ready to move on. I'm happy to help you move on.
Yeah, I think you bring up such a great point with being in love with the weight room as well. I think about the times where I've struggled the most in my career, or I've questioned about, is this job actually for me? Do I want to continue doing this? It's probably the times where I've fallen out of my consistent lifting, right? It'd be the time where I'll hit 1 or 2 times per week I'll lift versus, a regular 4 to 5. And you made me reflect on it myself, right? And I think about it. And obviously I'm in a place now where I'm very in love with strength and conditioning and I love it. And my lifting's consistent. And I think that's such a interesting point that you bring up because that's where we spend most of our time, right? Is within the weight room. And so you do have to love the process. And I've noticed I'm a better coach when I'm lifting as well too, right? I can cue better. I can make sure that I'm actually invested in what I'm trying to say to the athletes instead of just, saying it. So I think that's an amazing point. Well, Angie, I truly have loved this podcast. It's been a ton of fun for me to get to know you better, right? But then also to hear your advice and especially filling in as the head performance coach role. I think it's awesome. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. This is great. And thank you for making it so easy. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you. That really means a lot. Seriously, I really appreciate that. Not only a great head performance coach, but great at giving compliments. So thank you.